Welcome, ACSA family, to Common Purpose, Uncommon Times. As always, Wes Smith, proud to serve as your executive director. I got a message from Sue Kaiser last week that said that she and her husband do date night Monday night. They get their dinner and they sit down and watch Common Purpose. Sue, you've got to get better date planning, I got to tell you. But hopefully you have a good meal in front of you, Sue, and we'll try to hold your attention. Thanks for tuning in. And to all of you, thanks for engaging and really leaning in to the last 2 weeks of our town hall on racism, on structural racism and inequities, and injustices that in particular our Black and Latinx students face. Thanks to all those who participated. It was a great event, a lot of good information. Adne did a great job leading that last week. And tonight we're gonna keep in this space, but we're gonna go from the macro level, statewide policy and what we do there, and we're gonna get into our system, to schools, to districts, and talk about those inequities and what we can do to create equitable models for teaching and learning. So we're excited about getting into our work and give you some ideas and things you can use. But before we get there, a couple of things we just want to bring to your attention. Looks like the budget deal has been struck. We're waiting on some of the final language there. The good news is, and I'm sure you've heard this already, it's a better budget than the May revise. Looks like they're going to hold us harmless and really invest as we called on them to invest and provide you with some of those flexibilities you're going to need to safely reopen schools physically. So we'll have more on that as the week progresses. But good news is there's a deal. That deal is better than what we saw in the May revise, and that's good news for all of you. And more importantly, it's good news for all of our students. I'd also like to bring this to your attention this week on our ACSA legislative brunch. We have that on Wednesday. Tune in. We're going to have Ron Nichetti, who is the executive director of CIF. And they're going to talk about what they're doing to plan for schools and sports. We know that extra and co-curricular activities are those things that engage and motivate our students. And so they're doing a lot of work in this space. I think there's going to be some great information there. So tune in once again to ACSA's legislative brunch this week. But hey, let's dive into inequities in our system and what we can do. I'm so happy that we have an expert in the house with us. And I got a call from a couple of my friends saying, you've got to have Dr. Salle get on your show. She's doing great work. And when someone like a Sandy Thorstenson or a Paul Gothel gets a hold of me and tells me I better do something, I do it. And so tonight, really excited to welcome to Common Purpose, Dr. Robin Avelar Salle, and she leads Orenda Education. So Robin, why don't you tell our ACSA family a bit about yourself and what Orenda does, and then we'll dive into this work that's a passion of yours and a passion of all of ours. So go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, yes, I'm an expert in 3 places, Sandy, Paul, and in my own mind. Other than that, I don't know. But I come to you very humbly, having done all the jobs, teacher, site administrator, district office, university professor. That means I'm either very good or I can't keep a job. I'm not sure which. And then about 23 years ago, launched off and created an organization at that time called Principals Exchange, and has since about 4 years ago or 3 years ago been renamed to Orenda. And I just want to tell you, Orenda is a word that comes from Native American tradition. That means the energy force inherent in every human being that gives us the power to change the world and to change ourselves. Ain't that great that there are languages with one word can express something so meaningful? And so what we've done over all these years is partner with schools and districts upon request and really dug into the systemic issues. We're not of the belief that the gaps that we see in outcomes for kids are individual people doing wrong. We believe that it's a system, and the good thing about a system is it can be diagnosed, it can be corrected, and then outcomes can change. So since COVID happened, we've really gone back and looked at what the equity issues are that we already have seen in the last few weeks, plus let's predict what is inevitable moving forward so that we can get ahead of it and offset them. That's what we do. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Glad to have you. I love that word too. I didn't realize that's what it meant. And that's certainly a language I could do well with, because I have a hard time saying anything. I just overstate it with too many words. But hey, seriously, thanks for being here. And we're excited to have this conversation. You may know, and I know you do because we've talked about it, ACSA put together this work group to study reopening models. How could we and should we move towards reopening schools physically where possible? And hopefully it's going to be possible everywhere to some degree. But how do we do that? Let's ask the experts. And so we put this together. We've shared that with the field. And so I would ask you, what can our leaders be doing right now to get ready for reopening in the fall?
Beautiful. Well, I'll just tell you an experiment. What I did was to take all the guidance we have now, ACSA being among the best that we have to date, and created my 20-day, 40-day, and 60-day to opening to-do list. And then I put an equity model, a specific equity model that hasn't been identified yet commonly in the field. And I just came up with one that I'll share today, I hope. And then I came up with my 20, 40, and 60-day to-do list, and they were very different. So the first thing I want to say that we can do is that we can really come up with a model of school, not a schedule for schooling, but a model of school that we backward map or reverse engineer from. Because what we're doing right now will be completely different, as evidenced by my personal thought experiment. If I could just offer, what's going on right now has been written about, and I love this term, amygdala hijack. When we're in emergency mode, which we have been, we feel like we're being chased biologically. We feel like we're being chased by a lion. And so what we end up doing is talking about what we've been spending the majority of time talking about legitimately, which is health, safety, security, food security, housing security. And what doesn't feel like the same basic need is model of schooling. And so what we really need to do is to elevate as leaders. We need to get through that amygdala hijack and recognize what's going on when we're doing that, and call it out and say, I know what our brain is telling us to do. But as leaders, we need to step out of that and look forward and say what we're missing is this discussion about school model. So that's main decision or that we need to make right now, a design that we need to create right now.
Oh, I love that. What's interesting is that I wish we had this conversation a month ago, because as we looked at our...
If I had a dime for every time I heard that in the last month.
No, because we talked about reopening models, but we really talked about schedules. Now, we called out other things. I think we're the only association thus far that's called out, for example, that we have to have minimum standards for high quality instruction. That allowing students just to download stuff and do a ditto, it's not high quality. And that's going to further exacerbate those gaps that folks like you and I and our members have been trying to narrow and then eliminate.
Absolutely.
So we've got to do better than that. But you're talking about a model. So tell us more about that, about what is an equitable model, not a schedule.
So what I'll say is a couple of things. One is that we know that every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. Therefore, the gaps that we've gotten, we call them, they come from opportunity gaps and experience gaps and access gaps. They end up with outcome gaps. We know that they're a result of a system that has been here for, decades and decades and decades. And that system is so strong that it survived the virus unscathed, because those inequities have just been exacerbated. And what I worry about is, absent a specific model, the discussions that are being had around town without a lot of direction are going to perpetuate or exacerbate those inequities. I'll tell you a couple of things. One is that right now, in the name of a model, there seems to be a trilogy of components. The foregone conclusion early on, and it has stuck, is that we need a one-on-one device for all students. We need Wi-Fi or hotspots for every student and teacher, by the way, not everybody has one. And we need a staggered schedule. And that's been the extent. ACSA's direction, I think, is one of the few, and we did an analysis of all of the guidance documents in California, which include all the states, all the organizations, advocacy organizations, and then all the county offices. And there's almost no discussion about the actual model of school. And what I want to suggest is that when we come back full time, if we don't have a model that with intentionality breaks up the potential inequities, and we know they're just going to be the things that held over, then we're just going to have more of the same. An example concretely is I'm hearing things like, and forgive me if any of you are thinking this, it's not coming from a bad place, my sharing this, but just forecasting that some kids will come back, but not all. So let's bring back all the vulnerable kids, English learners, students with disabilities, students in the foster care system. So, and then let's give parents who don't want to bring their students back a completely different experience. Let's give an option to do either independent study, where they meet with someone once a week, or completely different distance learning model. I'm sorry, but last time I checked, separate wasn't equal. And that's exactly what's going to happen. Kind of feel like there are a lot of things that we've already known, that we've learned, we're sort of forgetting because of this amygdala hijack, and we need to revisit. So what I'd like to propose, and then we could talk about the specifics, but I'd like to propose that we think, I'm just going to challenge us, that we take the responsibility and realize that, or recognize that the health of our schools and our students and the health of our economy are two sides of the same coin. We are almost, mostly, if not all, responsible for restarting the economy, because parents can't go back to work, even teachers, if school's not open. Imagine teachers saying, I'm sorry, Principal Robin, I can only work every third day because that's the schedule of my children's schooling. It's just going to be very, very challenging. So what I'd like to push is our thinking beyond what we thought of right now, which is that trilogy of Wi-Fi devices and staggered schedule. And is there a way that's doable in our real world where we can get all kids on campus safely and push our equity goals, which are the true, right, and just goals we've been working toward all along? So I would like to tease you with that, and I challenge you to ask me how we can do that.
Well, I'm gonna take the challenge. Before I do, there are different realities in the way of politics throughout the state. Counties and county public health see this differently. We've seen some areas where they look at the CDPH guidelines, which we endorse, and they see the guidelines, and then they try to do the best they can. For example, if 6 foot social distancing doesn't work, we've seen some folks get to a model where it's 3 feet with protective face covering. And so in those areas, they've got models where they can get almost all of their students back on campus, like you're describing. Now, other counties won't agree to that. And so, again, we've got these political differences. Yeah. People are seeing it. And this is a highly politicized issue. We just got to be honest about that, right? And it's getting in the way of folks doing that, of getting people back. But you asked us to ask you, so I'm going to ask you, how do we get our students back on campus? Of
course. And the other side of it is we have districts where the community's very much advocating just to get everybody back on campus with no modifications, just normal school, period. So it's very difficult. So what I'd like to do is just to say, if you come from the true, right, and just place, then even if you make a mistake, at least you get grace. And so the true, right, and just thing is to get kids back in school. We know that from other states, and other countries that have had school closures for various reasons, it could take between 2 and 16 years to get kids back on campus. Dropout rates go way up. Girls especially are at risk for horrible things. So, and the economy influences students any way that you look at it. So what I'd like to suggest is, first of all, just decide that you need a model, not a schedule, and then to think about 5 things. Use these as criteria. First, and is that we have known always that in order to close the gaps of outcomes of various groups of students, people have done that, we've done that, you've done that, it can be done. Demographics need not determine destiny, but there needs to be an intentional design in order to override that strong correlation. First thing is, don't forget about standards-based instruction. We need to have targets that teams of teachers, let's talk about instruction right now, that teams of teachers are going for, that they backward map from. That's very different from some of the practices right now, which is, what am I going to assign students to view online? We have everything from soup to nuts. So that's the first thing. Do you have targets that teachers have identified in teams to backward map from? Secondly, we know that almost a magic bullet, if there were one, for closing gaps is a continuous improvement cycle. That means you know what you're going to go for from an instructional standpoint, what your objectives are, and then you measure it frequently as a team. And then that gives you feedback on how students received what you gave them, and then you respond. And when you do that as an individual, that's great. When you do that as a team and as a school and as a district, well, the results are magnified in the positive direction. The third is collaboration. We've always, for the longest known that collaboration is wonderful, and, we've been encouraging it. There is no way to do this work today without collaboration. Our teachers are overwhelmed and they need to be able to share the load. When they do, this is very doable. When they don't, it'll break the adults. And without the adults, you have nobody to help the kids. So we have to be kind to the adults. The fourth is that all the research in the world says this, and here's exactly what your guidance said, Wes, was that it's instruction, not technology, that promotes positive outcomes for kids. All the research worldwide and in other states is clear on that point. And what worries me is that the definition of instruction has somehow dissipated. It's become an abstract concept, and it's not. It means a live interaction with adults and kids, with teachers and students in a lesson design, in some lesson design. So the emphasis on technology is it's misguided. And then lastly, the socio-emotional needs of students and adults, actually. Kids need to feel connected to their teachers and their counselors. They need to see the faces of people. They need to see them on every day on a regular basis. That's absolutely connected to student outcomes. What worries me is the discussion right now of minimizing the interaction between adults and kids, and really having schooling by assignment with online assignments. So those would be the parameters that no matter what design model you select, please bump it up against those criteria.
Awesome. I was going to let me first remind everybody, if you have questions, please put them into the comment or the chat. We'll try to pull those out. I was going to save the Q&A for the end. There is, you keep, and I love it. You keep talking about these standards, right, for high quality instruction. My words, not yours, but we had a question from Raul. He says, do we have minimum standards for equity, access, and SEL? Do we have those? And, we're calling for them, but do you know examples of those that, you could share that either you have, on your website or you're aware of, so that our members can walk away tonight and look for these things? So
let me give you a school model that encompasses that. I don't want to define them because it doesn't matter what words we use for them. What matters is how they are expressed and sort of what the operational definition on the ground is. So let me give you a model that encompasses all of those, and I'll make a case for it. It's a model, not the only way, but it is one way to get economic recovery and get all kids on campus. And we'll call it TLC. apropos right now. But let's talk about the L part, the T, the L, and the C. The L stands for learning online. Right now, no matter what model, whether all kids are coming back on or no kids are coming back, or some will be here, some will be there, and that's going to be fluid because school needs to be geographically neutral now. We don't know where we're going to be, and it needs to be geographically fluid. Those are two very important criteria, meaning that at a moment's notice, there will be kids and adults coming, kids and adults going, and you want one model, not model whiplash, but one model that'll handle all the scenarios. The L, the LOL, the learning online will always be needed. But there's research to the learning online that suggests, and it's almost silly to say, but not everybody can sit in front of the computer and receive full educational benefit from that. I'm waiting for all the comments here. You know that. If you don't speak English, that's going to be difficult. If your reading level's not at the same level, or your vocabulary is not at the same level as what you're viewing, that's going to be difficult. If you don't have the background knowledge, that'll be difficult. So there are technical components to the learning online that we know need to be. And I'm going to tell you what those are.
Or support at home as well, right? I mean, that's another area where we know there are great inequities, where if you have adults at home, they want to help, and they don't have the capacity to help their students, and that's not the same everywhere.
You can't rely on that. So that's one of those things that will continue the gaps, but it doesn't have to be. So let me tell you what the research says on this. Just interesting. The research says that the number one obstacle in having learning online be beneficial for kids is that kids don't view it to completion. Actually, adults don't. Even when we get on a YouTube video, how often do we actually finish it to the end? And you have to at least finish to the end. There are 5 areas of the research that we'll just call the 5 Fs, just to make it easy, where the learning online has to fit these criteria in order for the likelihood that 100% of people view the entire and interact with the entire learning online segment. One is that it needs to be focused. That means focused on an instructional point, not just general knowledge. Think about all the stuff we've been assigning. Secondly is that it has to be fast. Do we realize that the sweet spot of how many minutes something needs to be to actually get 100% viewership is between 6 and 9 minutes, less than 10. So we go for 10-minute chunks. Think about what we've been assigning there. Third is it has to be fun. There has to be something that engages kids, either intellectually or emotionally or culturally. There's got to be some hook. Fourth, it has to be friendly, meaning accessible. It has to be, there needs to be a narrator or something, a character that makes the kids feel it's not a static, distant experience, back to the need to have connection. And lastly, it needs to give kids feedback frequently. And the reason is, in the absence of understanding, the brain makes meaning. So kids are going to be constantly thinking they understand when they don't. And if there's no feedback, then kids are misunderstanding. So practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And when you're practicing wrong, blah, 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 we know. So that's the learning online part. I say that's, so in this model that I'm going to share with you, learning online has to adhere to those 5 elements for all the reasons that the question asked about. And also the acknowledgement that some kids need a facilitator when they're online, period. Not all kids can be independent on the computer, and we can't rely on parents to do that everywhere. So in this model, the idea is to have a non-credentialed person, an instructional assistant, an avid-like tutor, a college tutor, repurposed after-school staff that can come up during the day and help, be assigned to students who either requested if they're old enough, or who the teacher assigned to a coach, and the coach does a Socratic seminar questioning technique with them to extract the meaning. Learning online facilitation, if the students are English learners, needs to have the English learner skills to be able to draw that out. If it's students with disabilities with different sorts of disabilities, then the facilitator needs to have the routines that'll help those, and those all exist. So the learning online is one area, either with or without facilitation. if you don't have the option of having with facilitation, it's not an equitable model, just from the gate. The second component is the teacher workshop. So if there's one primary equity difference that is a requirement because of COVID, is that no longer can we have entire classes of large numbers. So I'm not saying increase class size. I'm going to have my 30, my 35 kids. But what I mean is my teaching groups have to be half that size. So 15 kids or fewer in my teaching groups, and then I rotate through my teaching groups. Not only do you have to have that because you have to have social distancing and safety, but we know that differentiating instruction to a large group was like, putting a square peg in a round hole. We do the best we can, but there's a reason why the gaps continue. So it is sort of a unintended consequence, but in this case, a positive one, that we have to teach in small groups. In order to teach in small groups, then there's, and what I want to say to that is back to the guidance from ACSA. ACSA, you're asking for clarity and for a floor, an agreement on what constitutes teaching. So let me offer an answer to that right now. Not a political answer, not a policy answer, but one from brain science. I'm a cognitive psychologist by trade, so let me offer that. Teaching requires the expert to help shape the thinking of a novice. Students are novices by definition, teachers are experts by definition. It means live interaction in a design of a chunk of time, a lesson design between a teacher and students. And that has to happen every day. So I ask everybody and anybody who's listening to not let amygdala hijack get us off the track. Let's address the basic worries, that legitimate worries that people have about doing that. But let's not forget that the end run still needs to be, kids need to be taught, because it's instruction from a capable, supported teacher that gets outcomes accelerated. It's nothing other than that. Other things are just accelerants. So how do we get, if I'm going to have a small group, then how we get all kids on campus, and this is the ideal part. We have to start with the ideal, and then we work our way down. The ideal is that when I have half of my kids, the other half are somewhere on campus, not with me. And then we flip. And so, or I go to them so that the safety issues are minimized. But that means that another adult, not credentialed, works with them. And what I'm seeing is more inequities. What I'm seeing is people saying, and forgive me, I don't mean to hurt anybody's feelings, but let's open up the gym and let's put seats 6 feet apart, and let's house as many kids we can in the gym, as many kids as we can in the multipurpose room, as many kids as we can in the, the band room or whatever it is. And that is housing kids. And we know that certain students will sit there and quietly do their homework, and others will have absolutely no educational benefit from that. So instead, imagine a situation where if you have one of these non-credentialed people in a space outside of the classroom where they're doing something profound, high impact, low prep, that's a sweet spot, like a Socratic tutorial, teaching kids how to work as a follow-up to the teacher workshop, teaching kids how to work in a study group, how to advocate for themselves, how to articulate what it is, agency, what they understand, what they don't understand. And it's a routine that a classified person like this could absolutely do with 1,000% efficiency. So you're going to ask me, how do you do that? So these are two things that are required to get to this ideal. One is you have to have the staff, these other people. And what people are doing, I'll just tell you that our districts that we're partnering with, they're doing an HR inventory to see how many of these other folks, from classified staff to outside people like organizations that come in to help, City Year in LA, there are others. And then after school staff that can be brought up during the day. How many do you have and how many do you need? And then how many more do you need to hire? And that's what this money's for. And then secondly, you need space. Well, here's how people are thinking about that. Between declining enrollment, plus the percentage of parents who want to keep their kids back, which our assessment across the state appears to be between 20 and 30% on average. Those will be kids that are at home. Then we have the rest of the classrooms that are available that are being used for other reasons. If we repurpose them back for instruction and then add some sort of temporary structures, not necessarily portables, but these, for example, tents that are not really tents, but temporary structures, and that's what the money's for, then we can do this. And we can have all kids on campus, and that's an equitable design. So to me, how you handle equity, how you handle social justice, how you handle social emotional needs of kids and of the adults who serve them is to have a design that acknowledges these realities and as one that I just described. And then you backward, you compromise as far back as you have to. But let's start with, let's open up our minds to the possibility. And just for everyone who's watching, people are doing this now.
Yeah. No, I'm so excited to hear you talk about these standards, these high quality standards, because if we are going to eliminate these gaps, it's going to happen through high quality instruction. There's no other way to do it. There were a couple of questions in there, and I think you answered. I think Shauna asked about parents being facilitators of learning and maybe some supports for them. I know PTA is working on that. You gave us some ideas for how, if they don't have caregivers at home, how students can get some support. Kimberly asked about funding, that we're going to need funding, and the good news is it sounds like we got more funding than we had in the May revise, and you got to know that ACSA was advocating for that daily. We even got in trouble for being so vocal about it. We told the governor we can't do it. We can't open schools safely and equitably, as you pointed out, with fewer resources. We need more resources. And so just wanted to let Kimberly know that we've been fighting that battle, and it looks like with pretty good outcomes. Dr. LaSalle, I just want to thank you for taking time. You have things to do in the evening as well. Heck, maybe Monday night's your date night also. You have to spend it with Wes Smith. But this is so important to our members. This is what they want to talk about right now. And having some ideas that you laid out, concrete ideas, those standards, those 5 standards for learning online, that's powerful. So on behalf of our 18,000 strong, I just want to thank you for the work you're doing and Orenda Education is doing, and encourage you to let us know how we can help and how we can work together and partner in this effort.
Thank you. Well, at least let it not be for a failure of imagination that we don't do this true, right, and just thing. At least let us be bold enough and have our equity muscle, being worked, that we challenge ourselves to this should be redesigned.
Yeah.
Not the others, not what staggered schedule we're using. And as I said, if we mess up, but it's because of a true, right, and just intent, we will get grace. But at least let's try the true, right, and just first.
Hey, that's a perfect way to close us out. I'm gonna thank you. I'm gonna thank our members for tuning in, and we'll see all of you next Monday night. Please be well, be safe, and Dr. LaSalle, thank you very much.